crying little.
Welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, hi, and if you're not new here, hi. So before I say anything, let's have this week's shout out. So this week's shout outs go to Josiah, Changwa, and Sarah. These are their comments, and if you want to know how to get a shout out, you have to watch the entire video, because at some random point I'm going to tell you the requirements to get a shout out. So without further ado, let's start the story time. So just a tiny disclaimer before I start, I have a hip condition called SUFE, S-U-F-E, which is basically the femur cap on my thigh bone, my right thigh bone had an infection. It was like covering the whole thigh bone, got eaten up, then slid, then yeah, this went up, so one leg is shorter than the other. So this is not like for you to pity me or anything, it's just for context, because what I'm going to tell you has got a lot of ups and downs. Without wasting any more of your time, let's start. So let's rewind to 2016. Young Tahira, very much excited to be a grown-up, and I was in my phase. If you don't know what that phase is, it's the phase where I like, no, everyone hates me, my family members don't appreciate me, I need to get away from them. So I tried my best to get away from them, and I thought, what's the best way to get away from your parents or like your family members without running away when you can't afford to run away? Go to a boarding school. That's all. So I started looking for schools. Then my mom told me like, oh, did you know you have an auntie that's a teacher by Ndolatik? And I was like, yes, we have found the school that I'm going to. So I told her like, oh, I want to go to boarding. Then she was like, but you have to get a specific amount of marks. And I was like, I will get those marks. And I wrote my exam and I got that result. So she was like, okay, let's go. So the process starts, like everything is going okay. We tell my aunt, she finds me a place and I go there. Everything is going okay. I set up my bed with my Hello Kitty beddings. I'm feeling bougie. Then afterwards I set up my bed and everything's done. So my mom goes together with my sister and like my dad, and they leave me. But I didn't have my uniform. I went a little bit late, so I didn't have my uniform because I didn't go for the official orientation. So then I like go to the place where I'm supposed to get a slip to get the uniform. Then I meet a lady, and not just a lady, I think she's a teacher, and she goes like, oh, your hair. And I'm like, eh, my hair? Then she's like, oh, your hair is permed. And I'm like, oh, no, it's not permed, it's just overblown. But then they wanted to overblow it pin straight because I'm going to boarding, and like, no, Kylie, I won't have a blower, so I need to have straight hair so they can maintain it better. So she was like, we don't allow permed hair even if you're saying it's not permed, so let's go wash it to see if it's actually overblown. And they washed my hair, then it reverts. Afterwards I went to class. After like my hair just dried a bit, I enter class, and it's like, then the teacher that's in class tells me like, oh, find a seat, and I get a seat. Then immediately I sit down. He's like, oh, we're having a civic test. And I'm like, eh, excuse me, what? I had to write a test. He's like, no, just try. And I'm like, oh, sir, I'm from grade 7, I don't know what you're talking about. Then he's like, no, just try, it's just like SDS, and I'm like, we shall try. So I'm writing. Then the girl in front of me goes like, don't hand in if you don't know what's happening. I won't hand in. So like I remember I don't have a uniform. Then I was given, you remember that slip I was given? Yes, I need to get that slip, go to the office where I get uniforms from, give it to them, then get a full set of uniform. So while I'm doing that process, I'm moving around in school and I feel my leg is spinning. So I'm like, So it started hurting, and I had no other choice but to find a painkiller. But I didn't know where to get a painkiller. I never came with my own, so I went to the dispensary. Never really had friends, but I had a few people that would talk to me. So I go to the dispensary and the lady there gives me diclofenac, and I'm like, yes. I didn't know I was allergic to it at that time, but I drank it, and like after like a few minutes, maybe like 30-ish, it stops paining, and I'm like, I'm okay now. People come back like from activities, and I get my bucket because everyone is doing that, and I go fetch. So my leg stops paining completely, and I'm like, I'm feeling a bit dizzy, a bit tired, a bit sleepy. Let me sleep. So I sleep. It made me so weak. Like I slept and I tried to wake up a bit. I felt sleepy again. I slept. but then like the day was going on, so then it's time for evening prep. People go for prep and I remain in my room. Like, I don't know, I think one of the people that inspects a room after class comes and she's like, why are you still in your room? And I'm like, oh, I took some medication, so I think it's one that's making me sick. And he's like, no, you're supposed to at least tell someone. What's the problem? I'm like, oh, there's a crutch there. Then she's like, you have a crutch? What's wrong with you? Like, I explained, oh, my leg. Then she's like, let's go to the headmistress. And I'm like, what? What have I done? So we go to the headmistress and she's like, oh no, if I had any idea like this is, you even use a crutch? Huh? Who's that? If I had any idea that you even use a crutch, I wouldn't have allowed it because it's going to make it worse. Wedding is like spaced. So like the first time I left, I really didn't want to leave that much, but then I was okay with leaving because I was like, you know what, I don't even want it anymore. I called my parents and we came back home and like that's the end. But that's only part 1. Part 2 is where things get spicy. They get very spicy, very intense. Skip ahead, I write my grade 8 and grade 9. I go to Dominican convent and it's a girls' school, Catholic girls' school. My mom's sister was at Kasisi and like a few other people that we know at Kasisi. So she was like, let's take you to Kasisi before we try to even think of Ndolatek or anything like that. So we call like my mom's connections and all that, and she finds me a place at Kasisi. And we pay and all that, and I'm like, okay, I'm going to wedding in Lusaka. So I like go to Lusaka with my sister, we go to my dad's house, and while we're there, like everything's okay. Then the day before the day I was supposed to leave, it was a Saturday and I was supposed to go there on a Sunday. At night, I just became very scared. I was like, oh guys, boarding, yes, is nice. I want boarding so much. But then going in Lusaka with no one I know, and like in an environment I don't know, in a town I am not used to. And I'm like panicking at night. Then the next morning, early in the morning, I'm up, I'm ready, and I tell Tandy like, oh, can I cover me? And she's like, yeah, sure. I'm like, mommy, Mwanzime, I'm sorry, but then I can't manage. I won't manage, please find a way to take me away from here. Then she's like, yeah, even me, I was a bit worried. I'm sure she's just trying to sugarcoat it because she's like, this girl, she's not serious. Study serious we might. First they refused her to go to this school, then we found her a place at this school, even paid, they don't want to go there anymore. But then like she called my dad and she's like, oh, I don't think it's okay for Tequila to go there. And she called my aunt, the one from Ndolatek beforehand, and she managed to get me a place there. So I had somewhere to go, like I had a backup plan. But then she was like, no, I don't think it's safe for Tequila to be there because of her leg. It still gives her problems and just needs to be monitored. And I know you're a busy person, my dad, so you won't be able to take care of her. So better she's with like me, where we can at least check on her once in a while because Ndolatek is next to Ndola. So after that, he's like, he tells me a lecture and I cried. He tells me a lot of things. He's like, it was genuine advice, but I was crying because I felt so bad. I'm like, so I've wasted his money. But oh well, just move. So I come back to Ndola. Then everyone is like, okay, you're back, but I guess okay. Then we start like preparing to go to Ndolatek. Everything's ready. I had a trunk, gumboots, like I was so set this time. Then I go. I enroll, I have my first day. I remember when I was going there, first thing, like the first problem was that I was the 5th roommate. If you don't know how boarding setup is, you have a room, a bunk this side, and a space. You have your closest 2 sides and everything, like everything just okay. Then I come in the middle. The room is not built for 5 people. It's not supposed to be for 5 people, it wasn't made for that, but then I was a 5th roommate somehow. So they put like a bed frame in the middle and I came with my mattress because of Kasisi, they even bought me a mattress like to help with my leg and all that stuff. It was like, it had potential. Kasisi had a lot of potential, but then it's in the past. And like I moved in, the mothers helped me bring in my mattress and they helped me like put it on the bed. It was still plastic, so it was like, I'm trying to just like, this girl pees on her bed, that's why she's the plastic. I go in the room and I could tell like it was like, why? Like the people were like, us, why are people that? And they said it, like, it's not like they were like hiding it, the people in my room. They were like, us, even us, they brought first a 5th roommate, and like not everyone was there. So when like the other girls came in, they're like, guys, another person. I could tell like they never wanted like a 5th roommate, and I understand your room is already small. So the place is for relaxing and chilling. But then a person comes there with a grudge, with her thing, just coming to disturb. I came in and I could tell like people didn't like me. The environment was very uncomfortable. But then one girl was my saving grace. She came and she was like, oh hi, my name is T, and hi, like let us be friends, tell me more about you. And that we talked, and she was the only person I would talk to in my room, because other people I could tell didn't want me there because I was clearly finishing space. But then still understandable. So yeah, then we go to where things get more complicated. This time around, I even had my uniform. I got it like the same time everyone that came in grade 10 got their uniforms, and everything was like decent. A few days later, it's morning prep, right? Morning prep. Then it was rainy season that time, so I go for prep and it starts raining on the way. But I was so sad, I started crying. I just started crying. I'm like, no, people don't like me when I'm crying in the rain. And another thing is like I didn't have my keys to my trunk, so every time I would rush to go get food from the DH, the dining hall, and I just didn't have the chance to have friends. It was just very awkward. I made a few friends, like less than 5, but then it was distant because they also had their own friend group. Then I think you remember my friend, that friend. Yes, I walk into class after I've cried in the rain the whole time. Then she comes to me, she's like, no. I immediately enter class, I go to my table and I put my head down. Then she's like, no, what's the problem? And I'm like, no, nothing. She's like, Heyyyy, you're crying. And I'm like, then she's like, no, you know, everyone like gets homesick, especially when you just come, you feel very lonely. And I'm like, I'm not crying. Let's run through how many bad things are happening. I'm the 5th roommate, so my roommates don't even like me that much. I don't have the keys to my trunk, so I can't make fancy things like noodles and have time to click with people through food. I have to rush to the kitchen, dining hall to get food. 2 things. 3, I don't know, I'm just sad overall. That was peak insecurity time. So anything that made me feel like even the tiniest bit insecure, I just feel like a million times worse. My anxiety was always through the roof. Then on that fateful day, that one fateful day, I snapped. It's a normal day, sad. I had a few friends, but then they weren't in my room, they weren't even in my dorm. So in my dorm, in the entire corridor, we go for evening prep. It's time for evening prep, right? Then the day is just okay. This time I actually had my keys. I got my key the day before this happened, so I spent like 3 days without my keys. Then on the 4th day, which was the day this happened, I got my key. Then the next day, that's when, yeah, stay tuned, I have my key. I get like Cocoa Pops. I even put them in a lunchbox because all the cool girls eat food during prep. So I carried my thing, but I'm even ready. I'm like, yeah, I'm going to finesse in class with everyone. So I go to class and everything's okay. Then while I'm there, we study, and like we even had a teacher that brought us like work. Then the lights flicker and I'm like, okay, it's okay, it's just load shedding. Everyone that has lamps pulls out their lamps and like start studying or continue studying. And I'm also like, let me also pull out mine. And we just continue until lights completely go off. Then we're like, okay. Then we hear something drop. So the people that have their like lights on, it's only like enough to shine onto your desk. So we hear something drop, it's like, do. Then shortly afterwards, the tables like space out, and I'm like, hey. So the lights come back on, and the tables have moved around like in front of me, like to my right in front of me, and one of the girls was on the floor. So I'm like, what's happening? Like everyone is like a bit scared. So like, hey, are you okay? Like what's happening? Then it's like almost like a seizure, but then like shaking. It wasn't erratic movement while she was on the ground, but then it was like shaking, not like fast random movements. There's like slowish moves. Not really, I can't really compare it to a seizure, but then it's a thing that keeps coming into my head. So yes, everyone's like, oh my god, what do we do? Then people are panicking, people start climbing on their desks, you know. So everyone is panicking and like we don't know what to do. So people start like trying to get out and climbing on their desks. Everyone is like moving very aggressively. Then Then in the process, my table falls back on me. I was still seated, so the table falls back on me. Then like the under part, the borak hits me, and I don't know if it's because it actually hurt or because like mentally I was so fed up with being there that this was like the last straw. I was like, you know what, I need to get away. A few people from my class helped me, and I go to the dispensary. So they gave me, I think, Panadol or something, not diclofenac this time. They gave me a different medicine, and I drank it and I fell asleep. While I'm sleeping, I feel something drop on my head. I really don't care because, you know, I don't pay attention to it because when you're sick, when you're not feeling well, like you're just done with the day. I was fed up. You don't really have time to feel tiny things like that. But then after like ignoring it for a while, I'm just like, okay. So I do this to my head. I'm like, then a lizard falls to the floor. Not a gecko, not like a pretty lizard like a gecko or a green type of lizard like anything cute. No, a black one. Fat black lizard falls on the floor. Then it does like, then it like runs away. I'm like, can I rest? Can I just rest? Then I just sleep. I didn't even have the energy to be like, oh, lizard. So after that, I sleep. The next morning, a friendish of mine comes and she talks to me. She's like, so what's like the next step? What are you going to do? I will just have to try to find a way to cope, get better. Like we just have to stick through it. Then I was supposed to talk to the lady that's in charge of that area. That's like the nurse, the school nurse. Then I explained to her like my story and like how I was here before. Then she told me, she's like, you know, after this almost 2 hours of talking to you, I genuinely think you need to go. Boarding is not for you. You may try to force it, but it's not for you. And I was like, even me, I've stopped forcing it. Let's go. I didn't even like say, I wasn't like, oh no, please, I want to stay. No. She's like, I'm calling your mom, she's coming to pick you up, you have to go. And I'm like, even now if possible, go how we go. My mom comes, she's like, again. Then I'm like, But then she's like, you know, we missed you, let's just go back home, let's move on, let's just go back home. After I came back home, people were just like, again. Then my sister was home, so we ate my noodles, we ate everything, we finished the food. It was so, yeah. I hope you enjoyed this. This is take 2, by the way. So if I like all over the place and I'm not like organized, it's because this is take 2. I did this once. It was very nice. I liked it. I edited it. I put my heart and soul into editing it. Then I find the audio quality is bad. For this week's shout out thing, you have to comment white emojis because I'm wearing white top. So you have to comment white emojis. Any white emojis and you will get a shout out in my next video. Stay swag. And if you haven't already, don't forget to subscribe and comment something nice. Yeah, thank you so much for 256 subscribers by the time I'm recording this. Thank you. Bye bye.